for grace, for favor. Yeah.
Hey Facebook family, how are you doing on this magnificent Monday? What a privilege again God has allowed us to come to you and to share with you how good He has been to us. And I'm quite sure He's been real good to you too. We have been doing this series on stewardship and what it means and whose it is and who we are and whose we are and what is our responsibility because of what God has given unto us to be toward Him about managing His stuff. Everything belongs to Him. You do know that, don't you? The earth is the Lord's, Psalm says, and the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. Ezekiel 18 says, every soul is His. Another passage says, the beast of the field is His. Haggai says, the silver and the gold is His. And then in 1 Corinthians 6 it says, we are not even our own. We belong to Him. We've been bought with a price. We have not purchased ourselves, but He has purchased us. So everything we are and everything we own really does belong to God. And because it does, the question that you and I have to face on a day-to-day basis is, how are we managing what He has given unto us? I pray that we would and that you would also look in the Word of God, and you will find there how God expects us to manage what He's given us, what He expects us to do with what He's given us, and also how that is a measuring rod for Him to be able to entrust us with more. But we have to be faithful over the few things, and He promises to make us ruler over many things. As stewards of God, please keep in mind, it has a lot to do with our motivation on why we give. It has a lot to do with our prior consecration that Paul says in the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 8, how the Macedonian church gave out of trouble, gave out of their poverty, but yet they gave joyously. And the reason why they could is because they first gave themselves to the Lord. I pray that when it comes to your resources, I've come to the conclusion, and the Bible has let us know, that if you give God yourself, He can use you to give your stuff. But don't never try to give your stuff first without giving God yourself. That Macedonian church did that, and their lives was blessed as a result of it. So I say to you that as a believer, you make sure that you practice the principle of prior consecration. You also, as a believer, make sure you practice that principle that Paul tells us to do so when it comes to this issue of us giving and how we ought to give with the proper motivation. Our hearts ought to be pure. We ought not be manipulated to give. We ought not be pressured to give. It should be a natural response because of what God has given unto us and what He has done for us. So I challenge you that it not only be this issue of prior consecration and this whole issue when it comes to our hearts having the right motivation, but also it has to do with individual and personal responsibility. We are all, going to be judged on what we give individually. God's not going to call a whole church up to the judgment seat of Christ and say, what did you all do? He's going to do it on an individual basis. What did you do? What are you accountable for? What are you responsible for when it comes to the distributing of God's resources? It's on an individual basis and not on a collective basis. A collective group of people may give to a particular church or organization, but when it comes to the judgment seat of Christ, He will not judge the church. He will judge me as a member of the church individually. and personally. So I say to you, when it comes to this issue of stewardship, are you a giver or